Hello and welcome to this TRIRIGA UX framework presentation for triblock-scroll-container building block component. My name is Eric Takahashi. I am a software developer on IBM TRIRIGA team. And this is the agenda for this presentation. I'll start with a little introduction and then show you how it works, component setup, and I'll finish with a live demo. Triblock-scroll-container creates a horizontal scroll container controlled by arrow buttons. So in this first example, we see the container with just a couple of items, and then when we have an overflowing content, the buttons become available so we can scroll left and right. Here we can see the component being used in workplace service. So here is the triblock scroll container, and we can scroll to the right using the right arrow button and scroll left, and we can click and drag to both sides. And this is just an example how the component can be used. The internal content of triblock scroll container can be either static or dynamic, and in both cases the scroll buttons will only be available when the content width is greater than the container width, and this is illustrated by this example below. Well, before I showed you how we can scroll left and right using the arrow buttons and drag and drop, but it's also possible to scroll both sides using the keyboard arrow buttons. You can use the following attributes to set up the component. The basic use of the building block component is just the building block itself and its internal content. With the auto height attribute, you can have the height of the component being determined by the height of the contents. So in this first example, we just have a fixed height determined by CSS, and in the second example, the height of the component is determined by the internal content. The scroller attribute with two-way binding can be used to apply scroll pagination. So here's an example how we can configure that just using the scroller attribute, and the scroller object can be used right here with triplet query scroll page. So with that, we can trigger the scroll pagination when scrolling. Now I'll show you a live demo of the content I just presented. The first example I want to show you is the basic setup. Here is the code for that. I just use the triblock scroll container and with its internal content, and here is what we see on the browser. I set these light green borders so we can see the component height, and as we can see, the component have a default height of 250 pixels. Second example is using the auto height attribute. To do that, we just have to use the auto height attribute, and as we can see, different from the previous example, the component height now is set according to the content height. As I mentioned before, the component have a default height, but we can also set a different height for that. In this case, I just use the CSS I just apply CSS using the style attribute and setting a height of 200 pixels. Next one is the overflow content. Uh, Before we just have a couple of items inside, but now that we have more, the arrow buttons become available so we can scroll both sides. And to do that, I just use the basic setup, and but now I have more items inside. So in this case, I use a long array for that to display more items. And the last example is the scroller attribute. So the code for that is this one. I set the scroller attribute. For this example, I have to use a data source with a triplet query scroll page, and I take this scroller object and set here, and in first instance we will see just 10 items inside the component, and when we scroll to the right we will be able to see more items being loaded. So as you can see in this example, the overflow content example, once we reach the end of the scroll, the button disappear, and same thing for the left button. And this is what we have, we can see this in this next example. I will scroll to the right, all the way to the right, and once we reach the end of the container, the button will disappear, and the button reappears. This means that more content just load here, so we can continue the scroll, and the button disappears again and reappears. This means that the scroll pagination is working and more items are being loaded. And that concludes this presentation. Thanks for watching.